Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai. Welcome to Srimad Bhagavatam class. We continue in the 4th canto, chapter 24, entitled Chanting the Song sung by Lord Shiva. We are at text 65. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Sa Esha Lokan Atichanda Vigo Vikarshasi Tvam Kalu Kalayanaha Bhutani Bhutair Anumeya Tattvo Ganavalir Vayur Iva Vishahaya Sa Esha Lokan Atichanda Vego Sa Esha Lokan Atichanda Vego Vikarshani-tvam Kalu Kalayanaha Vikarshi-tvam Kalu Kala no Vikarshasi-tvam Kalu Kalayanaha Bhutani Bhutair Anumeya Tattvo Bhutani Bhutair Anumeya Tattvo Ganavaliya Vayur Iva Vishaya Ganavaliya Vayur Iva Vishaya Sa Esha Lokan Atichanda Vego Vikarshasi-tvam Kalu Kalayanaha Bhutani Bhutair Anumeya Tattvo Ganavalir Vayur Iva Vishaya Sa Esha Lokan Atichanda Vego Vikarshasi-tvam Kalu Kalayanaha Bhutani Bhutair Anumeya Tattvo Ganavaliya Vayur Iva Vishaya Sa Esha Lokan Atichanda Vego Vikarshasi-tvam Kalu Kalayanaha Bhutani Bhutair Anumeya Tattvo Ganavaliya Vayur Iva Vishaya. Vaishnavis? Sa Esha Lokan Atichanda Vego Vikarshasi-tvam Kalu Kalayanaha Bhutani Bhutair Anumeya Tattvo Ganavaliya Vayur Iva Vishaya. Jagannath Baladev Subhadevi ki jai, Shri Shri Gaur Nitai ki jai. Saha, that, Eshaha, this, Lokan, all the planetary systems, Ati, very much, Jandavekaha, the great force, Vikarshasi, destroys, Tvam, your lordship, Kalu, however, Kalayanaha, in due course of time, Bhutani, all living entities, Buddhai, by other living entities. Anumeya Tattvaha, the absolute truth can be guessed. Gana Avalihi, the clouds. Vayuhu, air. Iva, like. Avishayaha, unbearable. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. My dear Lord, your absolute authority cannot be directly experienced, but one can guess by seeing the activities of the world, that everything is being destroyed in due course of time. The force of time is very strong, and everything is being destroyed by something else, just as one animal is being eaten by another animal. Time scatters everything, exactly as the wind scatters clouds in the sky. Purport. The process of destruction is going on according to the law of nature. Nothing within this material world can be permanent, although scientists, philosophers, workers, and everyone else are trying to make things permanent. One foolish scientist recently declared that eventually life will be made permanent through science. Some so-called scientists are also trying to manufacture living entities within the laboratory. Thus, in one way or another, everyone is busy denying the existence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and rejecting the supreme authority of the Lord. However, the Lord is so powerful that He destroys everything in the form of death. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 10:34, Mrityu savar harashtsaham, I am all-devouring death. The Lord is just like death to the atheists, for He takes away everything they accumulate in the material world. Hiranyakashipu, the father of Prahlad, always denied the existence of the Lord, and he tried to kill his 5-year-old boy due to the boy's unflinching faith in God. However, in due course of time, the Lord appeared as Narasimhadev and killed Hiranyakashipu in the presence of his son. As stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam 1.13.47, this killing process is natural. Jivu jivasya jivanam. One animal is food for another animal. A frog is eaten by a snake is eaten by a mongoose, and a mongoose is eaten by another animal. In this way, the process of destruction goes on by the supreme will of the Lord. Although we do not see the hand of the Supreme Lord directly, we can feel the presence of the hand through the Lord's process of destruction. We can see the clouds scattered by the wind, although we cannot see how this is being done because it is not possible to see the wind. Similarly, although we do not directly see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we can see that He controls the process of destruction. The destructive process is going on fiercely under the control of the Lord, but the atheists cannot see it. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuram Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Narati Svavrantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vagishayasya vadhane, Lakshmiryasya chavakshasi, Yasyaste hridaye samvit, Tam narasimham aham bhaje, Pralada hridayaladam, Bhaktavitya vidaram, Sharatindurachim vande, Parindra vandanam harim. The verse once more. My dear Lord, your absolute authority cannot be directly experienced, but one can guess by seeing the activities of the world that everything is being destroyed in due course of time. The force of time is very strong, and everything is being destroyed by something else, just as one animal is being eaten by another animal. Time scatters everything exactly as the wind scatters clouds, or shatters, you say. Clouds in the sky. So I felt a bit like I spoke about that last time because we had a verse also addressing the time factor. There it was mentioned 2 weeks ago that time cannot affect the devotee, that he is not under the influence of time. And we discussed some aspects of the time factor, what it is and how it works. And of course we established this is the force or the energy of Krishna that is essential for the material world to even come into existence. So I'm going to repeat a bit of that again. In the Brahma Samhita we hear that this time factor is particularly used or governed by Mahavishnu, because he sends out with his glance this very energy. And the effect of that energy on the Mahatattva is that the elements that lay loose so far, because nothing is manifest, they become combined. They, what we call manifest, from subtle to more gross. There are evolutionary processes or descriptions in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, explained by Lord Kapiladev, that always say, like, one element, first element is ether, or sound and ether. These two things are created simultaneously under the influence of time, and then by the influence of time and the glance of the Lord, one element evolves into another. You know, from sound then comes also when the sky is there, then air is manifest, and then gradually fire, then water, and earth, and so on. And each element keeps within itself, or like contains, the qualities and features of the element it evolves from. So in ether there's sound, in air there's then additionally touch and sound, in fire there's shape, touch and sound, and so on, until in earth everything is there. And I said all these processes are being done because the time factor is moving the elements. So that's something essential to understand. What is time doing? It moves. It moves matter, also it moves us. As we said, we are forced by time to act. That is also explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam in different places, that the living entity, we have desires, for example, and we feel urges. Also we hear in the nectar of devotion there are a certain number of urges we're supposed to consciously control. But this is also an effect of time, the push or the urge to go in a certain direction, to move somewhere, to do something. It is said Kala Shakti, also when the living entities had been sleeping in the abdomen of Garbhodakasya Vishnu, you know, when Brahma was asleep, she's the one she also reactivates the living entities in terms of pushing them to act according to their desires, according to their karma. So we could say time is the overseer in this material prison. Okay, Durga Devi is the goddess, but time, so to say, is I don't know how to say it in English, the one Gefängnisaufseher, you know, the person who is like in charge of the inmates, like in daily life, in the practice. So a movement means change, we said that last time, and change has two aspects. It can be welcoming and enlivening, it can be frightening, you know, because something changed, something what was there before is gone. Okay, something new may come. Simply change means as soon as I move a bit, you know, I have lost, so to say, the position I had before. You know, and so as soon as I give something away, like something is done, I receive something, I have something more. But movement means always change. And also our body is constantly in movement, in motion, internally, externally, and it changes. And that's the effect of time. That nothing stands still, and that's why everything is impermanent. Permanently impermanent. That's the nature of this world. Like, we live with constant change, but we try to hold on to a certain state of existence as long as we can. And from this discrepancy, two things arise: frustration and fear. Kapiladev also explains that he says in his explanations to his mother, that the time factor is that what causes fear, particularly fear of death in the living entities. Because it's the ultimate change. when there are no more other changes in the body. This is the change we are consciously or unconsciously most afraid of, because it's giving up identity. Because the conditioned soul, we as conditioned souls, we usually see this body as self, and even if we have a sense of that's not myself, still we're very familiar with it, we connected with it, and we might be very accustomed to a certain situation in life, and so therefore it's not necessarily easy to give it up, because we also do not know what exactly will be afterwards and so on, although we have information. But information is one thing, consciousness is another thing, if I really have the vision to see on the transcendental platform. So there is our daily struggle, so to say, with this force of the Lord, and it is highlighted here, the absolute authority of the Lord. Absolute means is unconditional, valid under any circumstance. One cannot argue with time, or you cannot bargain. And Srila Prabhupada used to have this example of a foolish person who asks the doctor, please give me some more time, as if time is something you can purchase. As it would be to our disposal when we say, okay, here's my storage of time, so I give you some more and you can buy something. And he says that's really unintelligent, because time is not in our hands. So we got to accept whether our time is up or whether we have time for something and to use it. And this is a way to see Krishna. It's not a pleasant way to see Krishna, and also Arjuna was very frightened when he actually literally saw the time factor. Because this is what also last time we mentioned it, that in the 11th canto of, in 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the time factor is being revealed to Arjuna. And it's one of the 5 essential topics of the Bhagavad Gita, the time factor. And it is explained by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur that Krishna intended to show Arjuna the time factor, and first he showed his feature as Vishnu. And they're don't have the exact numbers, but the first shlokas that describe what Arjuna is seeing, thousands of hands and arms and so on, describing Mahavishnu as the super soul of the whole Mahatattva. And then he proceeds to the more gruesome form, and all the soldiers enter into the mouth and being, crushed, and all the fire and all the horrible scenarios of destruction, because that's time essentially is being characterized by destruction. And Arjuna saw that form, and he was of course extremely disturbed, and he said, I cannot see that, I cannot tolerate that. And although he had the eyes to see it, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains, he didn't have the mind set to really seeing that, in the sense of being willing to kind of even relish that. Although Krishna then encourages him, this is the purport of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, say, no, please look at it, that's a very important feature. And he explains, because the demigods, for example, they have also a deva mind, not just the deva, the eyes. So therefore they can also much more appreciate this powerful and more frightening aspect of the Lord. So unlike Arjuna, who was used to Krishna, the loving person. So, but for the living entity that is conditioned and not merged in pure devotion of the Lord, it is important to recognize this aspect of Krishna, because there's nowhere in the creation where Krishna is not present directly or indirectly, and that would be indirect presence through his feature of time. And this is something Srila Prabhupada also, or the scriptures, make aware of in many places. That the atheist, is said also here, is experiencing Krishna in the form of death. And that's an authority we cannot deny. And what is time doing? Because it's so powerful, absolute authority means control. It can govern, and it has depends also. We see how we relate to Krishna, because one feature of the atheistic mindset is we deny God or defy God because we want to be independent, free. We want to determine our lives without any supreme authority. But here it is clearly explained, this idea is an illusion because you cannot put yourself above the laws of nature. We are not in the position to be the Lord, because the energies that we are considering to wanting to control our body consist of all the 5 elements, the mind, and so on. They don't originate from us. And this is explained in the Ishopanishad, in the first mantra, where the Ishavasya principle is explained. Ishavasyam idam sarvam, that everything that exists, the moving, the non-moving, that what is alive and not alive, that is owned and controlled by the Lord. And ownership is being explained as, since these things, para and apara prakriti, the soul and also the material elements, they emanate from Krishna or Vishnu, and they are maintained by him. Without them there wouldn't be these energies. So since he is necessary, or like that they even exist, he's also the true owner. That's the logical argument. From the soul, nothing emanates in the sense of the elements don't depend on us and their existence. Even we depend on our existence of the Lord. We are not self-manifest. We cannot trace back at some point in time, I manifested myself from nothing. We cannot say that. But Vishnu or Krishna has manifested us, he maintains us, and therefore he is the true owner. So that's a very essential teaching of the Upanishads. Of the Bhagavad Gita is also considered Gita Upanishad. And Upanishad meaning bringing one closer to the understanding what is God, and to destroy ignorance, and in this way become liberated from illusion. So that's the intention of the scriptures. And they explain who is the true Ishvara, and control means also simply, the word is also used competent. He's competent to control. The jiva is not competent to control. That means having the capacity, imagine maybe a simple example from daily life, money. You have, let's say it's your position to administrate certain accounts or money or cash flow. So there's a certain amount probably you can handle easily, you can oversee it, but the bigger it grows, the more it is, the more capacity or competence you need to properly administrate the thing. So and similarly you can understand, as people fail to even administrate on a material level, in many ways sometimes there's so much, you hear it all the time how people mismanage money in big companies or politicians and whatever, or they can't handle riches. It's just not the nature of the living entity to truly control that. It's controlling us. The influence is too strong. That may be any other given thing. So, but the Lord, since he's unaffected by these things, he's unaffected by matter. So he is in a position to control it. Similarly, if you're in a role, let's say let's take the field of communication with people. If there are conflicts also maybe in companies and teams, then they have someone external coming, a supervisor, or like a supervisor, you're saying. It's not the same as supervisor in English. I think it's more of a, how do you call it then? Mediator type of thing, So they come and they have a more neutral position. They're not affected by the dynamics of what's going on within that team, for example. So they can much more be an effective influencer than those who are like carried away by certain emotions, perhaps, or like have a biased vision of things. So similarly, in these ways, we can see the Lord is not under the influence of material nature, but above. And the living entity is not. So therefore, the Lord can be controller, and the living entity cannot. So everything emanates from the Lord, is maintained by him, exists only through him. That's why he is the true owner. And since he's unaffected by what he created, and has the capacity, the competence to control it. He's the true controller. And we are not, because we are limited in that. So that's a very essential argument that everyone can actually understand if you soberly and honestly think about it. You know, also the people, when we argue about the existence of God. So that's a very strong argument for preaching. To understand, okay, our belief is, okay, Krishna has, or God has different energies by which he creates the world, governs the world, destroys it again, because destruction is the essential theme of this, and as he does through his time factor. And can you reasonably argue, consistently argue that you are free of this influence, that you are not under the dictate of time? And if there is such a force that controls like a power, an authority, then it would be more logical that there is a person who is the authority, or like a powerful, you know, you said power, and the powerful is their energy and the energetic. That's logic. We don't have experience that an energy has not a source or like an energetic that governs it. So in this way, or a law is not without a lawmaker. You know, no one would argue, okay, das bürgerliche Gesetzbuch, what is it called in English, the Constitution or whatever, no, it's something else, but one type of law book, no one would say it has no author. It was just there at some point, but we accept it as authoritative. No one would do that, because it's not in our experience that something is being manifested without that there's someone who is the creator of it, or like in the sense, the author. So and similarly, we see the time factor is there. It is a force that takes its effect, and we cannot deny it, and we cannot escape it. And there's also a common thing that therefore, since the human beings tend to deny the existence of God, and they deny other things as well, like death, which is the ultimate influence of time. And sometimes I buy these magazines about some psychology, and there was a special kind of edition dealing with grief and loss, and there's also about like there were very interesting subject matters, and one is looking at life from the perspective of death. And they figured like there was a shift also in consciousness among the general public, that people had been much more in defiance of the whole idea of dying and life has an end, like still like 30, 40 years ago, and that now the generations are much more conscious, they much more entertain also the idea or the reality life has an end, there is death. Of course, on the other hand, in a not so good way, people are contemplate much more self-destructive ways of ending their life, you know. But it's not meant by that. It's more like, but that they are much more open to the temporary nature of life. That probably also has to do with the rise of spirituality. Also, the Krishna consciousness movement did a big part in this, I guess, because that this is more around. People are more aware of these types of realities, because in spirituality, this is what we do. We become aware of the nature of the world, aware of the nature of us, and contemplate what is our purpose, what is the meaning of all that, who is God, and what concept makes sense. So, and figuring that death is there can make life much more interesting, or let's say can create much more of a motivation to use life properly. Because what people do when they are close to death, might it be through disease or any situations, there's plenty of research, or like not just research but simply collecting data to say in hindsight they evaluate what has my life been. Many have the idea, oh, at some point I would just like to die peacefully, just it ends, like a peaceful off button. But approximately maybe 5% of people will have such type of death. Usually there's a whole process of dying coming, which goes along with at some time it's with maybe harsh or intense self-reflection on who was I, who did I want to be. And this can be a contrast, did I live what I wanted to live, and so on. And so there will always be reflection, reevaluation. And often, like, people feel when the death is truly there, they become more aware of what their life could have been, should have been. Whereas people who deny death, they rather maybe also live more in a bubble of where things can sometimes become also maybe pointless or not so inspired, and so on. And I think, but it's a better option to not think of death. But the awareness that life is ending, and that death can come at any moment, makes you more conscious, perhaps embracing life even more. Which sounds rather paradox, because people think sometimes, oh, if I contemplate death, then I become depressed and life becomes so horrible and fearful. But actually, on the contrary, the more you deny death, the more afraid you are of it. It's also a psychological principle. Things you deny, they are still there in the subconscious, and they push back somehow or other. But if you embrace as things are, and like you can be in tune, you can be in touch, and you can be much more alive, actually. So we in spiritual life also, it is explained, actually prepare for this very moment. It is Prabhupada in different places also expresses it like that the spiritualist is practicing detachment for once, developing knowledge, so that he is ready at the time of death to truly let go of everything that is to be, or how to say it, that has to be let go. Preparing for this moment, because we understand death is not the end, it's a stepping stone to wherever it's supposed to go. Giving up this body, we don't cease to exist. Therefore, actually, time of fear of death relates to fear of losing the body. And since in illusion it is equated to I will stop to exist, that is so fearful. But actually, the understanding is, no, I cannot die. As a soul, I will always be there. But the experience of death is horrible, and attachment to the body is painful. Because then there are even descriptions, if the soul has to leave a body and is very much attached, it is being ripped out with the subtle body, because the subtle body remains, and instead is kind of ripped out of this gross body. And since there is subtle kind of nadis, I think they're called, this kind of channels and connections between the subtle body and the gross body, it's very painful, being ripped out of this body. So, but if you cut yourself gradually the attachments with this body, you can leave this body more smooth. Sometimes also described like how the pure devotees, as really advanced people, for them death is actually not an actual experience. Also Narada Muni, it is explained when he at some point goes back to Vishnu, he's like, it's explained like thunder and lightning, how they follow each other, kind of, if this was the proper metaphor. So in an instant, he was just in the spiritual body, and there was no experience, oh, I gradually die, and then so on. He just left it behind. And there are similar descriptions also in Srimad Bhagavatam, that if one has attained a particular level of spiritual consciousness, death is not an issue. Said also with Dhruva Maharaj, there's a powerful image. When he was at the end liberated, when the Vishnu Dutas came to pick him up in the airplanes, and he also wished for, hey, my mother should come. And then there's the description, he stepped on the head of death. He stepped over it, so to say, on the airplane. So it's a powerful also image, like a symbol of how the devotee is not concerned with death. Devotee meaning the person who is transcendentally realized, who is situated in devotion to God, not just in the Hare Krishna movement, in a whatever, if he's on that level, person. So yes, that's one of our tasks, to prepare ourselves in this lifetime for the end of life already, not just when it's kind of approaching. To end with another short example why it is so important to be prepared, because there are different deaths that we die in between. Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Devi ki jai, Shishi Gauranga ki jai. Because death means nothing else than cessation of something. That can be a role you have, that you're used to. And that might be your profession. I see in my work also people coming and, okay, now the age for retirement gets more up. At some point people won't retire anymore, they just die at some point while working. And it's 64 is usually the age when you can, or it must retire, depending on your type of profession. If you can continue in your own kind of practice, that's okay, also possible. But for many, it means you are out of work life. Your role as a whatever person, might be a leader, like, well, you're an employee, it doesn't matter. But this role dies. And since people, like also Arjuna, had the same thing, I'm identified with that role. I am the relative of these people. How can I kill? How can I, cause death? I would die as well. So his false ego would die, in a sense of but I'm a relative, I'm an employee, I'm this, I'm that. And this threat that this role dies, that's frightening. Although it's not us, we actually know it. But deep inside our mind is too attached, therefore is afraid. And people come and they say, I don't bother about like all retirement and stuff. When time comes, I will do. But then they're just not prepared. They hope it still goes on. And they have severe crisis. People might have severe crisis when they are about to retire. What do I do now with my life? Who am I when I stop working? So these are essential crises of people. And if there's no like spiritual understanding, nourishment, okay, you are more than not just your body, your roles that you play, yeah, well, then it becomes very difficult. And therefore it's so important to look at life from a spiritual perspective and understand the temporary nature of roles and this body, and to nurture our spiritual understanding of who we are, what our destination is, and to be grounded as much as possible in our spiritual practice, because that is what will carry us at the end, when all also the material activities cease. I also think of if you're really retired and then your body is like kind of useless for so many works if you get older and older and older. So what do you do then? Bhajan. That's the idea actually. At the end of life you should be absorbed, simply meditation, chanting, hearing. Of course you do some services, but your body, if you're really, really old, so what do you, depending what your constitution will be, but at the end your mind shall be absorbed in Krishna. So that's the idea. So I will end here, Hare Krishna, and open up for if there are any comments, questions, remarks.
Thank you, very sobering topic. We need to hear it again and again. I'm just curious. In your profession as a psychiatrist, you meet those people on a regular basis who go through this retirement crisis and identity crisis. Are you allowed, as a working outside in a secular society, are you allowed to give them real solution, the real stress relief? That you're not this body. Are you allowed to do that, or?
No. First of all, I must correct you. I'm not. I'm not a psychiatrist. I work as an occupational therapist and like with certain other qualifications. So, no. Because the thing is, the official stance or politic is we do not kind of influence in terms of ideology, religion, ism. So, but what you can do is, of course, you can, foster or like you to encourage self-reflection and come in a bit more indirect way to get to the point. All right, I don't say Bhagavad Gita says this and that, but but the point is to lead people through to a reflection on that and encourage, perhaps, look at what different maybe cultures and religions say about this, about death and dying and so on. And sometimes it depends. When people, for example, ask me, what is this, and are you Hare Krishna? Sometimes it comes, and of course I say yes. I don't say, oh no, I don't talk about it. It's more like, then it might be this conversation, this regard might develop. Yeah, but otherwise, yeah, I cannot. Yeah. But spirituality is more of a topic. It becomes more and more. Also, the field of psychiatry becomes more sensitive. Also in Switzerland or like Europe, that spirituality is an important part of people's life. Of course, the definition of spirituality is more going in directions of deeper beliefs and values, worldviews that you hold, and they don't have to be particularly religious. Religion and spirituality, of course, often these two terms are being separated, but it can be also be you have whatever ideas or atheistic, monistic ideas, so it counts as spirituality if it's your deepest convictions with how you that you view the world with. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, thank you very much for lecture. I want to ask a question which I think a lot about this, and I want to ask. Some time ago I had some experience when I was ill, and I thought about death and in this way. And I understood that here is only two important things in my life. It's relationships with spiritual master and with holy name, with Krishna in holy name. And I started to think about this, and I understood that I have very, very small relationship with Guru and with Krishna. And then I tried to chant more. But now I understand that without mercy of spiritual master, my holy name doesn't work as it have to be. And my question is how to get heart connection with spiritual master, how to how to get very hard connection and how to live for him, how to be ready to give my life to him.
All right. I mean, one thing we understand is how do we establish the relationship with the person we accept as a spiritual master is that we try to fully embrace the teachings, or like the instructions. Instructions can be many things. Instructions can relate to what you're supposed to do in your services. Instruction can be philosophical instructions on how to understand philosophy, and so on. So it is about the sincere attempt to also relate to mission, mood, and emphasis on the spiritual master's teachings. So if the spiritual master for the whole movement is Srila Prabhupada in the first place. We have him as a Shiksha Guru and read his purports, his texts. And to have confidence to say, okay, I accept these as authoritative and I try to embrace them as much as I can. And this also, another part of it is that it takes time to fully enter the teachings, to fully get a full picture, to understand this, so that because also Rupa Goswami advises us in the Nectar of Instruction that our devotional service is being supported by 6 qualities. And first is Utsahan, Nishchayat, and Dhairyat, enthusiasm, confidence, but also patience. So relating to time. Sometimes things take time. So at the same time, we should be confident. He explains it like this, that you can be assured that results are coming. You can be assured that Krishna will see what you do and so on. But at the same time, patience, he says, is also required when you serve, for example, your guru, when you try to serve the holy name. He compares it to the pregnancy of a woman. She might want to have a child, but she has to wait, first of all, depending when she will get pregnant, but then when she's pregnant, there's at least 9 months and so on. So there's time in between. And in this way, there are a few qualities that are important. And connecting to the spiritual, service is that what we try to offer. And also my experience is, if you sincerely serve, and even if the service may be not so pure, but if you make a serious sacrifice, the blessings will come. Even if you serve devotees, like generally, if you say, I go a bit out of my comfort zone and I support and I'm willing to jump in here or do this there, that's also something that generates blessings. Because we are willing to accept inconvenience, and that's what Srila Prabhupada defines as tapasya, voluntarily accepting inconvenience. Right? There's a limit to it. We should not try to accept tapasya we are not fit for, because they will just be destructive. But to some degree, always you should be willing to accept some discomfort in terms of whether it's, do we like exactly what we do right now, or because maybe do what is necessary, do duties and so on. So I know these are a few thoughts on that. I don't know, is this helpful for you? Does it answer your question?
Yes, I heard a lot about Guruvata and Guruvani, but when I reading or hearing Guru, there is a lot of different things which you need to do, and you don't know what is main, what is not main, and you don't know Sankirtana Kijai or something else Kijai, and you don't know how to serve.
Yeah, I think I get what you mean in terms of there's so many possibilities or many statements about how to actually do that, establish the relationship. I think one thing that is helpful, besides that you get clear instructions what to do, to become aware what do you want from a spiritual master. Because your Prabhupada also says, like, if we say it's about surrendering to a guru, he said you should accept or find a person that you can surrender to. It's not that you can do this artificially. There needs to be conviction. There needs to be genuine faith, genuine connection. And therefore it is said also a disciple or like a potential disciple should connect with the person he or she might want to accept as guru and get to know this person and see can I genuinely surrender to that person or not. That there's also said of testing. You can test the guru by asking proper questions, but also trying to accept guidance and see whether it works for you. And the guru might test you in your sincerity, how much do you really enter the practice, what is your commitment, and so on. So yeah, become clear also, what do you think you want and need in your spiritual life or from a spiritual master, and accordingly maybe approach this person or that person. And essentially it's always about trying to offer service, but also inquiry, tadvidi pranipatana pariprashnena sevaya. So sincere inquiry and also offering of service.
Just like to I'm just reading Shuddha Bhakti Chintamani, again, book by Shiva Maharaj, and in the beginning he speaks, I'm in the beginning now, and he makes this point often that the association with devotees is so important. And I think it's a very practical realization I also made. Let's say I want to develop faith and attachment in Prabhupada just by listening to his disciples and spending time with them, be it on YouTube, listening to Prabhupada memories, or actually in person. I get so much faith in Prabhupada and I understand him better, and I think it's also with our gurus when we take the association of the God brothers and God sisters who are especially more senior. We can ask them also, or we can observe what they do, how they do. And so like you spoke about Krishna and Guru, and this Vaishnava Sangha is really one connection more to the Guru, I would say. And yeah, Shiva Maharaj speaks a lot about this, especially in our initial stage of devotional service. It's very, very important.
Thank you. Grantat Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Prabhupada ki jai.